Welcome to the debate. When you place the raw, suffocating grief of a human being right next to the cold, calculated mechanics of the music business, the collision usually leaves nothing but wreckage.
Yeah, almost always.
But in 2015, Janet Jackson releases Unbreakable. It debuts at #1 on Billboard, making her one of only 3 artists in history to achieve that across 4 consecutive decades.
Right.
And yet, the major label Pop Machine basically considered her a total failure at that point. Why?
Well, because you are looking at a landscape where an artist had been, quite frankly, systematically exiled from the major label ecosystem. You have to look at the brutal industry context of 2015.
Which was pretty bleak for legacy artists.
Fallout of the 2004 Super Bowl, and she returns after 7 long years carrying the immense, profoundly public grief of her brother Michael's death.
Which I argue is exactly why Unbreakable stands as the ultimate triumph of artistic sovereignty. You have a 49-year-old icon completely bypassing that major label machine.
Bypassing or being shut out of?
Bypassing. She chose to release a fearless 19-track manifesto of healing, independence, and self-deconstruction. She basically refused to play the game.
Okay, but that romantic notion of artistic independence, it's just a dressed-up PR strategy for a demographic retreat. Let's not sugarcoat what actually happened here.
I'm not sugarcoating it.
You are a little bit. When the majors drop you, you partner with BMG, you rebrand your shrinking audience as a deliberate artistic choice, and you disguise a bloated, frantic, sonic shotgun approach as artistic maturity.
Calling the creation of Rhythm Nation Records a retreat completely misunderstands the landscape of pop music in 2015. This wasn't a retreat. It was a highly calculated rejection of the cash grab pop machine.
Highly calculated being the operative phrase there.
But look at the timeline. She walked away from Island Records because they completely fumbled the promotion for Discipline. She deliberately scrapped the 2009 recording sessions with Rodney Jerkins because she was, genuinely trying to figure out her own sonic landscape.
Right, she was lost.
No, she was recalibrating. When she finally returns, she doesn't go begging to another major label. She becomes one of the first African-American female artists to launch and own her own record label.
Because she had to. Come on, let's not romanticize this. BMG wasn't some bohemian sanctuary for misunderstood creatives. It was a purely risk-averse distribution model.
But she partnered with BMG specifically because they offered a long-term 18-month rollout strategy. Compare that to the standard major label deal at the time.
Which was brutal, yes.
Right? An artist on a major in 2015 was locked into a suffocating, 8 to 12 week radio cycle. If your lead single didn't immediately spike the Spotify algorithms or, catch fire on top 40 radio within 3 weeks, the label pulled your entire promotional budget. BMG offered her breathing room.
Sure.
She deliberately refused to chase the modern pop sound. Look at Madonna's Rebel Heart from that exact same year.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
An album desperately grasping at every single current EDM trend just to stay relevant. Jackson instead reunites with Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, the absolute architects of the Minneapolis sound, to create this pristine, timeless 2-act album.
See, you are taking corporate risk aversion and painting it as a bohemian rebellion. Let's look at the actual mechanics of that BMG deal, because the business side reveals the truth.
Okay, let's look at it.
You have BMG executives, like Hartwig Masuch, openly stating that they view the major label system as having inherent flaws. They explicitly said to the press, and I quote, "Market share is barely in our vocabulary."
Wait, explain that to me. If BMG doesn't care about market share, how are they surviving as a massive corporate entity? How are they making money off an artist like Janet in 2015?
Because they aren't carrying the financial risk of a major label. In a traditional deal, the major label fronts millions for recording, marketing, and radio payola.
Right.
And in return, they own the master recordings and keep the lion's share of the profits. They need market share to recoup that massive investment. BMG flipped it. They basically act as a premium distribution service.
So the artist takes on the risk?
Exactly. The artist fronts their own recording costs, the artist keeps their masters, and BMJ just takes a percentage to put it on shelves and servers. Market share wasn't in their vocabulary because they knew they couldn't compete for it against Universal or Sony. It wasn't about protecting her art. It was a cold acknowledgement that an aging legacy artist could no longer secure a massive top 40 radio hit.
Are you saying this is almost like a politician retreating to their most gerrymandered district? Like, you can't win the national election anymore, so you just play to the guaranteed base? Is that what BMG represents here?
Exactly. That is exactly what it is. And calling the album pristine ignores the actual grueling listening experience. We're talking about a 64-minute, 19-track runtime.
It's an epic.
It is a sloppy, sprawling shotgun attempt. She is awkwardly blending 90s R&B, 2000s pop, and modern sounds, basically throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks with that gerrymandered bass. It's heavily reliant on slow tempos that drag the pacing into the mud, and it completely lacks the structural discipline that made her earlier masterpieces work.
But you're looking at this purely through a cynical corporate lens. Listen to the actual record. The length and the supposed blending you're criticizing is entirely intentional.
Intentional doesn't mean good.
It's a two-act play. The first half anchors the listener in the familiar structures of pop and R&B, and the second half ventures into deeply experimental psychological territory. Let's look at the specific art being made here. Take the track Shoulda Known Better.
Okay.
This is a breathtakingly brave piece of music.
Breathtakingly brave. It's built on a recycled EDM beat.
It operates on a modern electronic framework, yes, but lyrically, she is brutally deconstructing her own legacy. She looks back at Rhythm Nation 1814, her massive 1989 album that preached this utopian, colorblind unity, and she explicitly admits that her youthful ideology failed.
I'll give you the lyrics are self-aware.
Highly self-aware. She sings about having an epiphany and realizing that next time I'll know better. She is acknowledging that a colorblind approach doesn't fix systemic issues. It takes immense artistic courage for a pop icon to dismantle their own defining philosophical triumph.
Sure, but...
And within that same track, she takes a direct shot at the media, saying critics only want to talk. How can you call this a calculated PR move when she is literally attacking her own legacy and openly antagonizing the press?
Look, I have listened to it, and what I hear is a profound lyrical message completely undermined by its own delivery vehicle.
How so?
Yes, admitting that the utopian vision of Rhythm Nation didn't solve global poverty or systemic racism is a mature realization, but look at the hypocrisy of the production. You are delivering this heavy, world-weary critique of your own artistic past over a trendy, superficial Z-style EDM drop.
I don't think it's superficial.
That is the definition of trying to have it both ways. You want the critical acclaim of a deep thinker, but you still want the Ibiza Club kids to stream it.
I don't see those as mutually exclusive at all. You can deliver a complex philosophical message over a dance beat. I mean, that's been the foundation of house music since the 80s.
But we are talking about calculated moves to leverage a legacy. Let's look at the album opener, the title track, Unbreakable.
A beautiful song.
It starts entirely a cappella, shifting into this thumping bass. It's supposedly this sweet, intimate greeting to the fans, thanking them for sticking around through the media storms. But the title itself?
Unbreakable?
Right. Unbreakable is the exact title of the opening track from Michael Jackson's 2001 album Invincible, an album where he famously railed against the media trying to destroy his legacy. Taking that specific title isn't just a sweet sibling tribute.
What is it then?
It is a highly calculated leveraging of the Jackson family mythology. Her own solar pop cultural capital was bankrupt in 2015, so she anchored the entire project to the sacred, untouchable legacy of her brother.
That is a deeply uncharitable reading.
Connecting her work to Michael's isn't leveraging his mythology for profit. It's processing an unimaginably public grief through the only language they both shared, which is music. It's good business.
It's humanity, but if you want to talk about her abandoning things that previously brought her massive commercial success, we have to look at the total eradication of hypersexuality on this record.
Which was another demographic necessity, not an artistic awakening.
Let me finish the thought, because the shift is monumental. Albums like Janet and The Velvet Rope literally defined modern pop sexuality. They sold tens of millions of records based heavily on that provocative, boundary-pushing imagery.
Absolutely.
On Unbreakable, she completely drops it. Look at the lead single, No sleep. It is constructed in D minor, sitting at a glacial 88 beats per minute. It is pure quiet storm, neo-soul aesthetics. She trades explicit sexual imagery for spiritual intimacy and sentimentality.
Uh-huh.
She demands that the listener meet her on a level of mature, quiet connection rather than cheap visual provocation. Willingly discarding the single most lucrative weapon in your commercial arsenal proves absolute artistic confidence.
Discarding it. She didn't discard it. The market aged her out of it.
I completely disagree.
Let's be real. Dropping the sex appeal wasn't some sudden spiritual enlightenment. It was yielding to the cold, hard demographic reality of the adult R&B chart. A 49-year-old artist shifting from hypersexuality to mid-tempo adult contemporary isn't a radical artistic revolution. It is the most standard, predictable career twilight move in the industry playbook. You adapt to the only radio format that will still play your records.
That assumes she wanted to be on top 40 pop radio in the first place, which everything about the album's rollout contradicts.
Really? If she was operating with such absolute artistic purity, if she was so unconcerned with modern trends and cheap provocation, why did they awkwardly staple a J. Cole rap verse onto the album version and the music video for No Sleep?
To bridge a generational gap, it connects her legacy with the current vanguard of thoughtful hip-hop.
No, it connects her streaming numbers to an active user base. For listeners who might not track the daily grind of an A&R rep, their job is basically to pair artists with producers and features that will guarantee a hit. So when you staple J. Cole onto an intimate track, that is a blatant, desperate A&R spreadsheet move.
Oh, come on.
It is! You need streaming engagement, you buy a J. Cole verse. It completely disrupted the intimate aesthetic you're praising just to gain the Billboard algorithm.
I'm struggling to see how a single guest verse negates the emotional weight of a 19-track album. Let's return to the most vital emotional core of this project, which is how she processes the loss of Michael.
Okay.
It goes far beyond just borrowing a track title. Look at the sonic architecture of The Great Forever. It is an 80s electro-pop masterclass, but what she does vocally is staggering. She deliberately lowers her vocal register and alters her phrasing to eerily match Michael's tone.
It is uncanny, I'll admit.
It's so precise, so technically flawless, that people literally had to check the liner notes when the album dropped to see if it was a hidden vocal stem of his. She embodies him. She wears his voice as a shield against the media.
I'll grant you the technical vocal manipulation is impressive, but to what end?
To send a message. She hides the acronym LUTFA in the lyrics, "Leave us the fuck alone," as this genius, high-art middle finger to the press that hounded their family for decades.
Right.
Then, contrast that dark, defensive posture with Broken Hearts Heal. You would expect a tribute to a suddenly deceased sibling to be a massive, sweeping, weeping piano ballad. Instead, Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis build this upbeat 100 to 120 BPM groove. She processes her grief through joy, recalling their childhood in Gary, Indiana, and she anchors the chorus with the Arabic phrase, Inshallah. She turns total devastation into an uplifting, multicultural celebration of faith and endurance. That is masterful songwriting.
Yes, she sounds exactly like Michael on The Great Forever. But when you zoom out and look at the album as a whole, what you actually get is severe sonic whiplash. Half the album is this ghost seance for Michael, and the other half is frantic trend chasing.
How is it trend chasing to work with the exact same producers she's used since 1986?
Because she didn't just use Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. You claim she completely bypassed the major label pop machine, but then she brings in new producers like Dem Joints. You have a track like Damn Baby, where she is literally interpolating her own 90s hit, I Get Lonely, but she's placing it over a heavy, syncopated groove entirely influenced by DJ Mustard, who was dominating the club sound at the time.
It's a great track.
Then you have Burn It Up, where she throws in crisp house drums, glossy synths, and calls in Missy Elliott to secure a mindless dance floor hit. How do you reconcile this deep anthropological meditation on grief with a track that exists solely to get played in a VIP bottle service club?
Because human grief and joy are not mutually exclusive. An album can hold a heavy meditation on death and a breathless celebration of life on the dance floor. That is the entire spectrum of the human experience. Why does grief have to be one-dimensional to be authentic?
It doesn't. But it has to be cohesive. You can't be a grieving poet on track 4 and a desperate club queen chasing a DJ Mustard beat on track 7. The cohesion of the album collapses under the weight of trying to serve too many masters.
But if we want to talk about whether this approach actually worked, we have to look at the undeniable metrics of independence that Unbreakable achieved. You keep calling it a failure or a retreat.
Because it was.
Despite having a minimal promotional campaign, no massive radio budget, and almost zero traditional media interviews, this album debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200.
The Billboard debut.
It moved 116,000 units in its first week, and crucially, for listeners who remember how weird chart metrics were getting in 2015 with the dawn of streaming, 109,000 of those were pure sales, physical CDs and full digital album downloads.
Hold on, you can't just throw around 109,000 pure sales as if it's a victory over the streaming algorithm.
It is a victory. With that debut, she became only the third artist in history, alongside Barbra Streisand and Bruce Springsteen, to secure a #1 album in 4 consecutive decades, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, and the 2010s.
Okay, but
Furthermore, No Sleep completely dominated the adult R&B airplay chart, holding the #1 spot for 12 weeks. She took her independent label, her own rules, and a refusal to play the major label game, and she completely beat the industry on her own terms.
do you know what 109,000 pure sales in 2015 actually means?
It means people bought the record.
It does not mean you beat the industry. It means you have a legacy, aging fan base that still physically drives to a retail store to buy a compact disc. In 2015, the entire industry was pivoting to Spotify and Apple Music. Pure sales were plummeting globally.
Which makes moving 109,000 of them even more impressive. Her fans showed up.
Her niche fans showed up. It does not represent cultural dominance. It represents demographic loyalty. Let's look at the actual trajectory of her career. In the 90s, an album like Janet moved 14 million global units. It dictated the absolute center of global pop culture. Even The Velvet Rope, if was considered dark, alternative, and controversial, moved over 10 million copies. By the time we get to Unbreakable, that mass pop audience is entirely gone.
Because the industry blacklisted her after the Super Bowl. We all know the mechanics of that exile.
The why doesn't change the reality of the numbers. The Billboard #1 debut is a statistical illusion. It was created by a fiercely loyal niche audience buying physical media in week 1 before the album immediately plummeted down the chart because there was zero sustained streaming presence. She didn't consciously choose to leave the massive pop mainstream behind to pursue high art. The pop mainstream evicted her, and she retreated to the only sanctuary left.
Well, we've covered an immense amount of ground today, and I think what this illustrates is the sheer density of Unbreakable as a cultural artifact. Whether you view it through the lens of a deeply personal, psychological triumph over public grief, or, as a fascinating case study in independent music distribution and demographic shifts, it demands to be studied. Janet Jackson's 19-track journey here forces us to ask difficult questions about age, legacy, and how we measure success in a fractured musical landscape. There's clearly so much more to uncover beneath the surface of this record when we take the time to view it from both of these.
The true, terrifying genius of Unbreakable isn't that Janet Jackson beat the industry. The genius is that she and Jimmy Jam successfully gaslit the entire music world into believing that being permanently exiled from the A-list pop machine was her own deliberate spiritual choice. She didn't transcend the industry.